it's me, Crystal, and today I want to talk about villains. Villains are my favorite characters to write, and so much so that back in the day, I used to have these great villains, and like the rest of the cast would be like really boring and really dull and like really terrible. I actually had this story back in the day that was a sequel to another story, and I was going to tell the sequel from the point of view of the villain and the heroes from the first book. And I loved being in his head so much that when I got back to the main cast, I was like, I don't want to see these people again. Like, I don't want to write from their point of view. It's like they were just all of a sudden like very uninteresting. And it's funny because in the first book they were very interesting to me because like the main character in the first book, like she like becomes a vampire and she kind of like loses her mind and like kills a bunch of people, and it was like really fun. And then the sequel, like she's calmed down, she got a grip on her sanity, and it was like she was going to be good, and I'm just not interested in that part of her life. And it became such a bad problem of my antagonist overshadowing my protagonist that one day I was talking to my sister about it, and she was like, why don't you just write from the point of view of the villain? And at first I was like, I can't do that. Nobody wants to hear about the villain's point of view. But then I was thinking, I do, and I read, so it makes sense that there would be other people out there who also want the villain's point of view. But then I was also like, but then I can't have a villain. And then the big fight scene is going to be against the good guy. But it did help me find like main characters that were more interesting to me. And so then I started gravitating towards like the anti-hero and like the imperfect hero. That way I got to have somebody who was kind of like not super sane and very interesting to me. And I also got to have like that really like cool bad villain, and I still got to have like this big fight scene at the end. Yeah, so there were three kinds of villains that I think make like the best kind of villains. And so in order from like my least favorite to like my most favorite, the first one would be what I call villain by point of view. This is the person who's the villain just because it's not their story. And if things were turned, maybe the other side would be the bad guys, or maybe they wouldn't actually even look that bad. And I don't really use this a lot in my own writing because it is my least favorite out of the things that I find the most interesting. But what I really liked was Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. Because it was kind of like, if it was Khan's story, he would be a hero. He would be awesome. And also, he kind of had a valid point. Like, he had like an actual legitimate reason to be attacking Earth. And it was just like, oh my gosh, we're the bad guys, but we have to beat him because he's killing us and we care about us and we don't care about him. And speaking of, like a really, really good example of this is the original Dracula. In Romania, Vlad the Impaler, he was a hero to the Romanian people, which is one of the reasons I like Dracula Untold so much, is because they really show that. They really show that he wasn't a bad guy, and I mean, at least not to his people. But, if you look at that story told from the other side, like the guy was a demon, he was the way he killed people was extremely bloody and it was very violent. But you have to think like he was doing that like to protect his land and to protect his people. And so depending on what side of the story you're on, Vlad the Impaler is the hero or he's bloodthirsty demon. So next we have the hero of their own story kind of bad guy. These are like the bad guys that they really, really believe they're doing the right thing. And some examples of this, I feel like are Magneto from the X-Men. Like, he really feels like protecting the mutants at like all costs is like a noble thing to do, even if like a bunch of people have to die. And there's also President Coin from the Hunger Games trilogy. Like, she was willing to do some seriously intense and terrible things to, I guess, to like restore democracy or something. And I mean, like, she really, really believed she was doing the right thing. And again, like, we're on the other side and we're like, okay, but you don't have to kill children. Oh my gosh, she's crazy. But makes a really, really great antagonist. And I do play around with this kind of villain a lot because I do think, they are very interesting, and it's just interesting, like, the kind of length someone will go to like, further their agenda. And the upcoming Winter Siren that I have coming out in the fall, Victor is this kind of villain. He really, really believes he's doing the right thing, and even though he has to do something terrible, it's just like he feels like the cause that it's for is like greater than like the bad that he's doing. which I just think makes him super fascinating. And it's also a lot of fun. Like, it makes him very human, and it makes it difficult too to like pick a side, because it's like you really understand where that person is coming from, and you're like, I really do understand why you're doing this. Even though it's kind of terrible, I kind of like don't want to hate you for it, maybe. And then the last kind of villain is obviously my favorite kind of villain, which is what I call the love being bad villain. And of course, this is like your bad boy, wreaking havoc, don't care kind of villain. You know, a good example of this is Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He would cause trouble and he didn't care. And he just had a lot of fun with his life and with being a vampire. Like, he loved being a vampire. And he knew he wasn't a good guy. But he's like, you know, that's okay. Like, he's not trying to, like, destroy the whole world. You know, so he wasn't, like, too crazy. Yeah, and I also feel like Lucius Malfoy from Harry Potter falls into this category, because he's, like, really, really snotty. And it's like, come on. It's like, he has to know that he's a snot and a horrible person. And that he's raising a little horrible kid. And he just doesn't care, because he feels like it's his right to be a horrible person, because of like who he is and like his family name and like all this stuff or whatever. And this is probably the kind of antagonist I have the most. I do have a story coming up where I have like a secondary antagonist, and she is working for like an even badder guy, and like she's pretty bad, but there's someone standing behind her who's worse, and that's gonna be a lot of fun when I get the rest of those kinks worked out. But I feel like this is the kind of antagonist I have in No Rest for the Wicked, which came out in May. I also have a couple of bad guys in that story. I'm kind of partial to having multiple bad guys, because that's just how much I love them, and I like the layers. And like in No Rest for the Wicked, you have like this bad guy who is like super greasy and super creepy and just like super disturbing. And then like standing behind him is somebody who's like, it's like he feels like his agenda is for a noble purpose for his people, but he does realize that he's a bad guy and he doesn't care. You know, because he's like, all I'm trying to do is keep myself alive and keep my men alive, and you know, like, who cares who dies in the process? And the good thing about this kind of villain is that even if you flip things, like, he would still be the bad guy. He's still doing terrible things. But like, what makes characters like this like really three-dimensional is that they have a reason why they're doing things. They're not just burning down buildings just to burn them down. I mean, like, villains like that are great too, because that's what the Joker is. The Joker is, you have no idea why he's doing anything. Joker is like, oh my gosh, especially in The Dark Knight, that was my favorite Joker, because it's like, he wasn't just like robbing the bank because he wanted all the money and he wanted to be really rich. He was like robbing the bank and then like burning the money, and you're like, oh my gosh. Like, this guy is insane. Like, he was just creating mayhem. Like I guess he just wanted to shake things up or something. And that kind of villain is really fun. The problem with that and the book world sometimes is that they end up being a little too cartoonish, and they end up being kind of one-dimensional. But I don't know, there's just something, I feel like maybe a little more disturbing about having a villain where, like, you know, like, why they're doing what they're doing, and it's the fact that they don't care that's, like, really disturbing. It just makes them more three-dimensional, it makes them more real, and then sometimes it makes them more terrifying. Because, like, just the thought that somebody would, like, know they're doing something bad, like, really bad, and then, like, do it anyway, it's really terrifying. But it also means it's a whole lot of fun to watch and to read and to write about. So anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.